Amilagna has asked, what are the reasons for an I-140 denial? Kindly give us specific answers. Don't tell us USCIS is strict because of Trump, because this is what the agencies have been telling. We already know that USCIS is strict and scrutinizes everything these days, but what are they looking for? Twice denied at the same service center in Nebraska, but different agencies, different employer. Both agencies have assured me nothing is wrong with my credentials as an applicant. Carl, do you want to maybe start off and give some input to Sharmalagna?
Okay. Yeah, well, since I used to work for the agency, I know what they're looking for. I mean, number one, they're looking at the employer. Can the employer, do they have the ability to pay the nurse? And do they have direct control over the nurse? Some of the staffing agencies have gotten in trouble recently because, you know, the nurse may be working 100 or 1,000 miles away from where their headquarters are, and they're coming to the employer and saying, show us that you're controlling the day-to-day activity of what the nurse does, you're supervising. And that can be a real challenge. And I think a lot of the staffing companies have seen a lot of I-140 denials because of that. Less frequently have been on the nurse side. You know, if the nurse doesn't have a proper license, if the nurse doesn't have the proper degree to show that he or she meets the qualifications, that can also be a reason for an I-140 denial.
Jacob or Chris, do you have anything to add to that? Anything else to share?
I agree with Carl that you know, the ability to pay is definitely one of the main reasons. I've seen in rare situations where the actual position itself is a reason for denial, where it either didn't meet the definition of as what it was put on the I-140 with the exhibits, or sometimes they'll attack the position. I haven't seen too many nurse himself qualifications, but that could be in a general I-140 scenario. Sometimes we have issues with the actual applicant not qualifying for what is described in there. But I think ability to pay is the main reason.
Yeah, I don't really have anything to add other than I know that the questioner didn't want to blame the Trump administration, but we are seeing some unusual interpretations. I'm aware of a colleague, another attorney, not Jacob or Carl, who had an ability to pay issue that Jacob and Carl were mentioning, and it had about 17 I-140s denied, and then they had to go to court. And when they went to court, the federal judge said that the USCIS and the Trump administration was just ridiculous with their decision, and so all 17 I-140s were reopened and approved. So I'm sure it's difficult to hear that the Trump administration is the cause, and it's certainly not the only cause, but we've seen an uptick in sort of unusual denials.
And so, Chris, it's an interesting point that you mentioned, because we get a lot of people asking questions about what to do when there's nothing else to do. Kind of they reach the end of the rope, everything's denied. At what point would you recommend for the hospital or petition or to go to to fight it in court?
Yeah, I mean, on the ability to pay an I-140 cases, we had an I-140 case. It was actually on our IT side of our business, not healthcare, but we had 2 I-140s in December that were denied. We actually worked with a lawyer friend of ours, litigation attorney, and we sued. And actually, those cases were reopened in February, so it only took about 2 months. I think it's an employer decision. I think it's pretty expensive to file a lawsuit on a 1-by-1 case, Jacob. But I think if there's a breadth of cases, you know, once you start getting into, as an employer, not necessarily as the nurse, 5 or 10 or 15 cases denied, then the economies of scale probably warrant the lawsuit, because the lawsuit's not inexpensive. So it's difficult for smaller entities to pursue that.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you, Chris. I want to say a lot of employers may not realize that they can go straight to court rather than the Administrative Appeals Office that we call AAO
Right.
Usually that's a total waste of time because the AAO is part of the Immigration Service, and they could take a year to make a decision, and it usually just affirms what the Immigration Service said. But the courts are totally independent, so it's usually a better route to go to court.
So it sounds like Sharmalagna, can't get the name up. It's very early here on Friday morning. I can hear that you want to hear a simple answer to your question, but it seems like in speaking to the panel that there really isn't a simple answer. It would depend on the case, and unfortunately, it's not as straightforward as one would maybe hope. There might be a multiple level of reasons, and it can be a little bit complicated.